Okay, perfect. So we start with this fifth lesson, and in particular with the module 2 of our digital training course that we are making with the Make Trade and the companies that are linked to Make Trade. So just a second. I don't know, I have some problems. Okay. So we are in the, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. This is the fifth lesson. So the first one of the module 2, as you know, we have shared our 40-hour training course in 3 modules, and we are starting now the second module with on public procurement in the USA and Canada, in particular focusing on eligibility requirements and assessment criteria. So during the October and half November, we have done the first module, and now we start again with Jan for the Canadian first part of the module 2. So this is the banner that we have shared among our clusters and for sure with our companies. We are recording the modules because we can share with the companies all the training course that we are preparing. You know that the next lesson will be on the 1st of December with Jan Fenius, and as you can see in the attached banner. So I let the floor to Jan to present the Canadian part of this module. As you know, Jan, we have the 5 clusters that are linked in the today meeting. So we have ELCA, Luce and Veneto, Cluster Lumiere, SICAT, and BIC from Austria. So I let you the floor and enjoy the lesson to everyone.
All right, thank you, Antonella. So I'm going to start by, well, before I share my screen, I just want to put you a little bit in the Canadian atmosphere.
Okay. We can't see.
We can't see anything. It's bloomed out. Snow.
Jan, it's blurred, so you need to take out the
It's
background.
blurred,
Okay.
but it's blurred, but we're assuming it's snow, right?
Yeah, it is.
Blurred.
It is snow. We've been getting
you.
some snow the past week.
Thank you for sharing from afar.
Here we have the summer, so it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's a sunny
And
day.
also we got some snow. I don't know if you heard in the news, but so I'm based in Toronto, and which is about 100 kilometers away from Niagara Falls. And so just on the other side of Niagara Falls, there is a city named Buffalo in the US. And they got between 1.50 meters and 1.60 meters of snow in 2 days. So I can just let you imagine in a city of probably 700,000-800,000 people, the impact of that. And it's a pretty interesting phenomenon. It's what they call a snow lake effect. And
I was in Miami 10 days ago, and there was the tropical storm Nicole. I think that we can expect everything now because we have always storms, strange storms, and very dangerous in these different cities. Yeah. So in your case is no.
But so the snow lakes effect are very specific and very weird, because what happened is that it's not snow linked to a depression. It's just snow linked to the fact that there is cold air going on top of a lake. And so all the water evaporating from the lake just all of a sudden transform in snow and all dump the snow on the closest piece of land, which is in that case Buffalo. So you get no warning signs really, and it just goes in 1-2 days you've got all that snow falling. Anyway, I'll share my screen now. No. Sorry.
Now it
Okay.
now it works.
Now it's working, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
so much.
Perfect. Okay, so as Antonella mentioned, today it's module 2, part 1 for Canada. So module 2 is composed of 2 parts. Part 1 today, where we're going to talk about eligibility and go through a few tender examples. And part 2 on December 1st, which will be a testimony of De Richebourg, Canada. De Richebourg is a French company that established in Canada a few years ago, and they've been able to enter the market through a tender, and they keep developing through tenders and tenders only, because that's the only way for them to get new markets. So it's going to be pretty interesting to hear how they've done it and how they're still doing it. And Antonella, we'll have to talk, but the second part is a demo of the Merck platform, but unfortunately, December 1st will not work for them. So we'll discuss after the call today and try to find another date for the part 2 of part 2.
So you know that he is not available the 1st of December, so we have to change it.
Unfortunately, they told me already they can't. They are on off-site meetings. So so the part 1 with De Richebourg and Johan is good. It's just the second part which we'll have to reschedule. So we'll talk about it after.
So you can send me 2 different dates that we share with the other partners to define the new data.
Perfect. So today, we've already talked about the CETA, but I'll just review it very, very quickly, and then we'll talk about the Autorité des marchés publics in Quebec specifically, and then about all the specifics like local content, social priority, sustainability, and so on. And then the second part will jump into all the different type of tender from RFI to RFP. We'll look at awarded tenders and basically try to see what we can learn from the past. And then we'll look at some open tenders, and finally we'll look at the different, actually we'll look at those open tenders on different platforms. So the federal one, but also we look at a few provincial and municipal platforms. So we've talked about that extensively, but just in case some people are not were not on the previous call, in a couple of minutes. So again, thanks to CETA, all European companies under Chapter 19 are supposed to have full access to all public tenders in Canada. Again, keep in mind that, and we'll see that later, that there is some eligibility criteria that sometimes are restraining, at least I will say, a company from being able to answer. So by law, the companies can always answer, but I think it's wise to look at what is the opportunity and what are the chances versus the time spent in answering the tender. If there is, for example, a big statement, and as we will see on one example later about local content, I think it's not worth spending too much time on those. So fully open to everybody, but with some limitation from time to time. So I just want to share that with you, because that's a letter I received from one of my clients, and I'm sorry, it's in French and French only. You will see later that in Quebec, It's getting more and more difficult to get communication in English, and not only to get communication, but also their expectation in terms of answering the tenders. But so basically what that letter says, so it's a letter that's coming from a municipality that's just north of Montreal, called Laval. And so basically what that letter say is that that the city is about to launch a number of tenders, of public tenders. And so if you're a supplier and you're interested in answering those tenders, you need to make sure that you're compliant with the AMP. So again, l'Autorité des marchés publics in Quebec, meaning that you have to go see the AMP, well, not to go see, but you need to go online, get your file, answer your questions. They may ask some other question, but basically the idea is that you have to demonstrate that you have no link with organized crime, or that you have no bad intent. So it's for Quebec and Quebec only, Quebec the province. And depending on the city, it's more or less demanding, but it is very, very demanding for the city of Montreal. So,
Jan, sorry, this arrived to you directly?
so yes, but so maybe for you to understand, so when I work with some of my clients, I do work under white label, meaning that when I work here in Canada for my clients, I work under the name of my client.
Okay.
Meaning under their company name. So I have some emails that have the extension of my client. So it's jan@myclient.ca, for example. And one of the reasons we do that, it's actually linked to tenders, because by doing that, so we do incorporate a subsidiary in Canada for my client, and then I'm acting as a local point of contact. So the authorities feel like they have someone locally that they can talk to if there is an issue of some type. So that's why I'm getting those emails directly, because I'm registered as a point of contact in Canada for them.
Okay, so this is in any case some use practice. So they are communicating this, pre-announcing the tenders through emails, informing about the requirements before in time. Okay.
Correct. And I think because the AMP is quite new, they want to get everybody on board. Again, the AMP is what, maybe 2-3 years old, so it's, well, maybe a bit more, almost 5 now. But so all the new tenders are going under that regulation, because the AMP, as we discussed last time, it's being a new organization, and because there was so much material, they started little, and they were not looking into every single tender at first, and now they're trying to get at that level. But so yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of communication around that, so the companies are ready on time.
Okay, thank you.
So once you submit your file with AMP, you get an authorization to contract. That authorization to contract is valid for 3 years. You have the possibility to renew it, so you have a 90 days period to do so. And you need to pay some fees to be able to get your authorization. The level behind those fees are different from one time to the next, so I don't have a very good number to share with you, unfortunately. So, and again, the IMP is not looking at all the different type of tenders. They are focusing mainly on construction and bigger construction projects. So it's the threshold are at 5 million for a construction contract and subcontract, 1 million for service contract, And so you have to keep in mind that not all contracts in Quebec are subject to the AMP. But as I was mentioning before, for the City of Montreal, it's a little bit different in the sense that the threshold is at $100,000, which is for any repair of roads, water work, or so on, you know, a pretty low threshold and makes pretty much every project eligible for AMP. And it also applies to subcontracts, obviously, because they know that, you know, people will be able to divide a contract into subcontracts. So if you take a contract of 100,000 or more, and then you subcontract to different parties, all those parties that are getting a piece of the cake, which is larger than $25,000, will have to go through the AMP process as well. Okay, so it's not only the contractor, it's also the subcontractors.
So if there is a consortium, for example, that participate with the main contractor and the subcontractors, all of them must respect the requirements and must receive the authorization or
Correct.
go through the, okay.
Yeah, correct, because otherwise, you know, it's too easy to give the big contract to one of the clean players and then have all the not so clean players that are actually doing the work and getting the money. So that's why they had to do that.
So, but Jan, so we need, so if there is one main subcontractor, they already need to know who will be the subcontractors. But in case you don't know who exactly will be subcontractor for a specific work, because you will identify it after having the contract signed, they will have to go through the authorization afterwards.
Yes, but pretty much what it's saying is that if you intend to go into a big contract, make sure that the subcontractor you're going to use have already the authorization. So typically the idea is to say, okay, I'm going to bid on this contract and the pool of people I might subcontract, I'm going to choose the ones that have already the authorization themselves.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
So, so again, this is very specific to Quebec, very specific to the construction, but because of projects such in the lighting and street lighting and some building construction, I think it was important to address that issue. But again, it's in the province of Quebec only. So now, in terms of eligibility, what we see a lot, and I think we're going to see more and more in those different federal and provincial tenders at what they call subroute initiative. And basically, the idea is to give access or give priorities to some subgroups. So those subgroups can be composed, for example, of woman-owned or woman-led business. It could be indigenous companies. It could be Black-owned business. So there was a study made a few years ago, and basically what it was saying is that all those groups, there was clearly a big discrimination and they were never ever getting any public tenders. So now they're going into a system of positive discrimination and giving priorities to that type of bidders. And you will see later for larger projects that, you know, let's say an indigenous group doesn't have the critical size to do the project by themselves, they will require that at least some of the subcontractors are an indigenous group or a woman-owned group and so on. Okay, so it is becoming a big thing. All those standards tend to be more and more looking into social, sustainable, and some economics, and that's really the big trend of those standards now. So there is that initiative named Scale Up, and again, the whole idea is really to promote some other type of group of bidders. So I mentioned, but very quickly, so minority-owned, so you have women-owned businesses that are involved, minority-owned, and sometimes it's even mentioned Black-owned business. Veteran-owned business, veteran in the sense it's people who used to be in the army and now have left the army to run their private business. So veteran-owned business are also are also part of that group. And to qualify, and that's very important for European SMEs, is to qualify into one of those groups. 51% and plus of the business has to be owned by a woman, minority, veteran, and the majority owner must be a Canadian resident or a Canadian citizen. Okay. So if you're a woman-owned business in Europe and you have nothing in Canada in terms of structure, you don't qualify. It has to be owned by a Canadian. And it must be legally established and headquartered in Canada as well.
This rule is for each call, for each public tender, or it's in general, I don't know, for an entity or the authority. So each call must cover all these requirements.
No, so just some of the tenders are asking for it. Some of the tenders, and it's still a little part of those tenders, but some of those tenders will really specify that they give a priority to that type of business. But a lot of tenders don't mention anything about it. Does it answer your question, Antonia?
Yeah. It was for each call. I mean, of this particular kind of procurement. Is a requirement that concern the single public procurement. So, for example, for 51% of the business that must be on for women and so on, it's for the single public procurement for the whole.
Yeah, no, it's not all procurement have those requirements. It's just some specific tenders, and we'll see that a bit later today. So I'm going to, I hope it's going to work because I've put a lot of link in that presentation today. So let's see. Uh-oh. Okay, so there is a full document about indigenous participation component. So everything is described in that document. I will not go over it, but I just wanted to show you and give you the link where you can find all the details about how it works. So this one, that whole presentation here is for something called Maritech. And basically, it's it's a group of tenders that are related to marine technology. So there is in that full document all the details about what is an indigenous participation component and what has to be done to qualify. Great. So here I've just put together the few main parts of those initiatives. So basically the idea and what you have to remember, it means if you bid to that contract, those contracts that are developed by Maritech, You need to have an engineer's participation component, a participation plan, benefit plan. And so basically the idea is, if you answer the tender, make sure that you include some value for the indigenous groups and location. I don't, Antonella, were you talking to me or not? Because I saw your lips moving, but no sound.
No,
No,
I
okay,
was not
okay,
talking to you.
okay.
There is Alberto that is now connecting, and I was talking to him.
Okay, all good. So yes, so the process, supplier must provide a certification during their bid to meet the IPC requirement. Against IPC meaning indigenous participation component. And then you need to demonstrate that you will be able to achieve that predetermined IPC percentage. That IPC percentage change from one project to the next. Last time, I don't know if you remember, but Jonathan had mentioned that on some of those contracts, there is the engineer's business directory. So the link is here. There is about 2,400 businesses that are listed in that directory. So if you're in the situation where you have to answer a tender with an IPC, well, that's one of the place where you can find a local partner to answer.
Jan, you mentioned in the previous slide the documentation that must certify in some way, confirmed. So the participation plan, benefits plan, and so on. On the directory that you show us, can we also see the templates? Is there any templates that the companies must use to ensure this requirements or present some additional documentation, or is it free? So I just need to write somewhere that I cover the indigenous participation component. I'm collaborating with this and these organizations.
Yeah,
And
I don't think there is a template that's good across the board, because again, those standards are so different from the level of government and from one province to the next and so on, that I don't believe there is one common.
So in the proposal, I need to include these parts, like describe them.
Yeah,
if they are requested.
Correct.
Okay.
So yes, this is one example I want to share with you of one tender that requires that it's woman-owned. So this one is a request for information, and it says woman-owned or woman-led business offering catering service in the Atlantic region. So you will see here that supplier diversity pilot has to be woman-owned or led business offering catering service here. So it's very clear, you know, who that's meant for, and that's how you do find those type of tenders. It's made very clear in the document. Yeah. So that's just one example of that type of. So, and in that instance, it's an RFI, so request for information, and basically they will put an RFI together to see if there is enough potential respondent. And if there is enough potential respondent and the people have in that category the mean to answer, then they will make an RFP, which is for a woman business led only. If after the RFI they have no interest, they will just open the RFP to anybody else. So pretty much you have like a first round with the RFI for the buyer to determine if that idea works, and then they will put it together. So do you have, before I jump into the different type of tenders, do you have any question on the eligibility? Again, I think for that, for European companies, the restrictions are very limited. If you're a European company, again, you should be able to answer to every tenders, but then you have some little requests here and there to make it maybe a bit more difficult for the European company to answer. But I don't think it's meant as a discrimination to European company. It's more meant to protect or develop some local businesses.
No,
So
it's clear. For me, it's clear for now.
So
Yeah,
let me jump now into the different type of tenders. So the first one are called RFI, and it stands for Request for Information. And again, the goal of those RFI is to gather information for the planned project. So often it's a way for the government that putting together a bid to get some idea and some intel from the industry for them then to build a RFP that maybe makes more sense. So it's a good way for them to get information and to write the RFP in a way that makes sense, because if you put together an RFP and nobody's able to answer, that makes no sense. So when it's a bit more complicated or so on, they can do a RFI, or it's, as we see for the women-led business, it's also a way for them to define if there are enough players in some category to answer to a coming RFP. And I'm just going to show you an example here. So you can see here on the right hand where there is kind of a summary information. So there is a notice type and it's called Request for Information. When you I don't know if you remember, Jonathan last time showed us how we can select some criteria when we look for tenders. So when you look in those criteria and you look at category, you can choose RFI only. I don't get the point of doing that, but in any case, that's how you can identify all of those ones. So you have some more details. So here, by the way, trade agreement, it says none, but again, everybody should be able to answer. Tendering procedure, so all interested supplier may submit a bid. Again, here it says it's a LOI only, so letter of interest. And so then you have all the details. So the Department of National Defense, which administers the harbor, is implementing a remediation and risk management. And so you can see that it's a pretty complicated project with some remediation. They probably don't exactly know what has to be done. And so they put it under a form of RFI. So they give the work description, but basically what they want to know is how they're going to remove those 51,000 cubic meters of contaminated sediments, and they're very open to get some suggestions and best practice before they put it under an RFP. So the RFI itself is very, very detailed, but basically it gives the opportunity to people who are ready to bid to give some of their share some of their solution and go a bit further.
Does RFI has any threshold limits, or it depends on the public procurement authority? So they can be used for any type of contract, or Is there
Yeah,
any
I think
restriction?
as long as it's above the threshold, they can. So again, those thresholds are 25,000 for service, 40,000 for good. No, sorry, 25,000 for goods, 40,000 for service. But yes, as long as it's above those thresholds, they can do RFI. The first one I showed with a woman led was not a very high, very big amount. This one, I think it's $30 million. Yeah. This one, the total estimated value of this project is $30 million. So we can also understand that on that type of large bid, you want to make sure that as a buyer, you put a RFP that makes sense. So again, in that type of RFI, they can put a note about involving the indigenous community, for example. And again, it's in order to facilitate the information gathering exercise. So it's really to put together a lot of info. You can answer to the RFI and have no it's not because you answer the RFI and share a lot of information that it give you any certainty in winning the RFP that will follow. And some of those RFI actually do not translate in RFP because sometimes they come to the conclusion that there is either nobody able to answer or nobody able to answer to the project they had in mind, so they have to present the project a little bit differently. So basically, when you answer RFI, you kind of share some free information, but at the same time, if you have a technology or if you have a process that's quite unique and you think will help you win, it's a good way to share it. And then they're going to write the RFP in a way that's going to put you in a very good position to win. So it's kind of 50-50 kind of situation because either you share too much info and everybody has access to that info, or you share enough info that they write the RFP in a way that you have a good chance to succeed.
So this is so kind of pre-procurement dialogue of the authority with the company, with the providers, to check if there is somebody there that can respond, and if there may be requirements that they put are not too restrictive, because if they got empty, so there is no letter of intent or whatever, there is no RFI answer, it means that there is or nobody who is capable to provide the service, or the requirements are too restrictive or are not allowing the companies to apply, right? So if they receive these RFIs, they can check, and then they're going with the right procurement process. Okay.
Exactly. And you know, they could, for example, plan that project of 30 million to clean all the harbor in that situation in one shot. But then after the RFI, they could realize that nobody has the equipment in Canada to do so. Because that's a large amount of sediments you have to remove. So if that's the case, what do? Like maybe they're going to make it in 3 or 4 different RFP because they realize that they have to divide the localization of the area in different smaller areas for some people to be able to answer. So it can be a lot of different reasons. They can imagine that there is a technology, I don't know, someone's making a claim for, someone's putting together a bid for the defense, national defense, and they're looking for technology, but nobody can answer that technology because they know that the technology is available, but some of the companies that are in the national defense industry, sometimes they're restricted to where they can answer to a tender, and maybe they cannot answer to a tender in Canada. So therefore, they cannot have access to that technology. So putting an RFI together gives them an idea of if that technology is not available, what else is on the market. So yeah, so basically we've covered that, but they will, ask you how you're going to operate as a company or as a joint venture. What are your skills? What have you done before? So it's again a way to advertise yourself, and so on and so on. Number 4, again, could you recommend approaches for incorporating social procurement measures? So they will ask for people some idea how they can do a better job. And that last sentence, kind of what I was mentioning before, but it's very important. Most of those RFI will finish with that sentence, which is this RFI will not result in the creation of any source list. So therefore, whether or not any potential supplier respond to this RFI will not preclude that supplier from participating in any future procurement. So it's not because you answer or because you don't answer to the RFI that you're qualified or disqualified for the coming RFP. Okay. So I found an example here that I was trying to cover mainly tenders in any shape that will be in the lighting or furniture industry. So, but there was not like million of them. So sometimes you'll see it's a bit. Sometimes it's really spot on. Sometimes it's a bit more tentative. But so let's have a look at this one. Ah, that's not good. Why is that? Let me see. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not working. It was working well. I will try to reach it with another way. So, before and just as a parenthesis, that's where you can feel, find those different all those different type of tenders, RFE, RFP, and so on. It's in those filters. So I'm not sure it's. Sorry about that. I was not expecting that to happen. I'm just going to try this one. No. Ah. Yeah, I'm going to try one more thing, and otherwise we'll move on to the next. So it's not the one I wanted to show you, but in any case, you can see here that it's a request for information. No, it's not. Ah, that's frustrating. Okay, I'll try to come back on it later and find a way to find it later. Yeah. So I upload my Ariba link. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, we'll always find the same kind of information, meaning that it's not a bid solicitation, and it's not going to result into a contract award, and same information as before. So now the next one in line is what they call the RFP. So this one is a request for proposal. So we have an example here. So this one are lightning fixtures. So here you see on the right, request for proposal. You can answer. So documents are available in English and French. It has to be delivered in Quebec. And the selection criteria will be the lowest price. So trade agreement, Canadian Free Trade Agreement, CFTA, which if you remember last time, Jonathan mentioned when that agreement is available, it means that all the other trade agreements are available as well. So what I wanted to show you also here is that's something that comes back often when it says this procurement is not subject to security requirement. So it's most of the time you will find it. And sometimes when you're working with a defense or with a jail or different type of institution, there will be some security requirements. So that's something that comes back often. So here, if you go at the top, you will see the publication date, the closing date. So you have always the contact information, who's the person in charge and looking over that tender. You got the bidding details, so you have pretty much all the information and the amendments coming with it. And you can see the date where it was added. And you also see the number of unique downloads, which give you a good sense of how many people are planning to answer to that bid. And then finally, So this one is closed, so you can see who it was awarded to. So the winner was West Coast Distribution Canada. And if you go in view, so you always have on the top publication date, contract date, and what was the value of the contract. So in that case, they won it for $48,000. And there is just a few notes about that person. And then if you click on that link, it gives you some more information about some other contracts that that company was involved in. So I guess those are contracts that they've either participated in or they've answered to, but did not win. Oh, I'm going to. Okay, so that was the first RFP. And here you have all, so hopefully it works. So this is what a bid look like. Typically, when you download the full documentation, that's what it looks like. So it is all the details of what they're expecting in the RFP. And it's also, if you look at it in details, it's pretty much also kind of the, how would I say, the legal frame of the contract. So you have all the information, the applicable law, the evaluation procedure, and so on. So it's very detailed. You get all the information you need on the payment and so on. And as Jonathan was mentioning last time, that's the contract you have to go with, right? You don't have a choice. You can't. So actually, let me rephrase that. So in this one, you will see in Annex A, what we have here, it's what is required in terms of lighting fixture. So they tell you for that item exactly the type of products they want, okay? And it says the supplier is required to deliver lighting fixture as described below. But typically you also have a note that says you can also offer something a little bit different as long as you're able to make the demonstration that it's equivalent to what we're asking in Annex A. Okay, so there is always a little way around, but typically you will have to demonstrate that your product is equivalent to this one even before they start looking at the answer to the RFP. So you're always better with sticking with what they ask. And then you have here, you have the, you were asking about templates before, Marta, and I know it was a different question, but they do provide you with templates on how you should answer to the tender. Okay.
Is there also any list of certifications or labels that must be assured? So the product must get any product like quality labels or something like this similar?
So
or
yes,
it's only like technical requirements?
No, you can find in those documents the certifications that are required, but by default, especially for electrical product like this one, you will need to be CSA compliant, CSA being the organization that certify all electric material in Canada. So if there is no specific precision, you have to be at least by default CSA approved when we talk about electrical products. So then another type of tender, request for supply arrangement, RFSA. So the idea is to pre-qualify supplier And then once they've determined the pre-qualified suppliers, they can order directly to those people. Okay, so basically you put yourself on a list of people that they can require a bid from. So it's not a contract, but it's to put you in a position where you can answer. And the whole idea behind that is to accelerate the buying process, because basically the idea is that every time you go into an RFP process, between the time someone needs a new chair in their office, for example, so let's say they're reconfiguring the office and they need 2 more desks and 2 new chairs. I mean, with those numbers, you're below the threshold, but anyway, let's say you reach the threshold. If every time you have to do an RFP, it's a nightmare, right? So they do those type of requests for supply arrangement, and then it gives them the ability to buy from those kind of pre-qualified suppliers. So I'm just going to give you a real life example here. So you can see here it's for pre-qualified suppliers to whom a supplier arrangement has been issued under RFSA. We're not required to submit a new arrangement. So when you have a RFSA, it's either you are already one open, and in that case, you don't need to submit a new one, or you are new to it and you submit a new RFSA. But so again, you understand that the whole idea behind that is just to make it much easier for the government to buy from you. And then you have so again, supply arrangement, and now you have the RFP against the supply arrangement. So meaning that once you are in that pool of company on that list that you've done the RFSA, then you can be invited to answer to an RFP, which is reserved to the companies that have answered to that RFSA. So we have another example here. So here you see on the right, RFP against supply arrangement. And again, you can find all the information there. So, and let me take that opportunity to talk about that. So, as Jonathan mentioned, there is one site that I've been showing you a lot, which is Canada Buys, which is a new website for the federal government to put all their tenders. And as he mentioned, they also now going to have to transfer to SAP Ariba, sorry. So with Canada Buys, you have access to all that information without the need really to create an account. But as soon as the bid is actually now available on SAP Ariba, you need to go and log into your account. So it is quite, yeah, it is a little bit of work to create your SAP Ariba account. So now I'm sure a lot of the European companies, SMEs, already have a SAP Ariba account to answer some tenders in Europe. But if you don't, you have to do it, and it takes a little bit of work. But so from there, you can go and you can see more details about the tender on that new platform, which I find is a mess. Personally, like it's Canada Buys is very easy to navigate. The SCP Ariba platform, it's a bit more challenging. and this morning doesn't seem to be opening. So I don't know what's happening here. So I don't know what's happening. Yesterday I checked, everything was working perfectly.
Yeah, and we can blame it on the snow outside.
No, I think they're all watching the World Cup. That's why, I don't know. I don't know why it's not working. I don't understand. So let's me move on, and we'll try to come back to those a bit later. Just maybe I don't know. It was working perfectly well. So anyway. So in any case, you can find all the bidding details here. Okay, so it's under a PDF format. So again, it's the same type of document as the one I showed you before, which has all the very detailed RFP. And if you go to so here you have all the type of buildings that need a recommissioning. So this one is interesting because you see that you can see the detail of the points. If you remember, Jonathan mentioned that you have a different type of RFP. Some are lowest price only, but some have a mix of technical and price, and they award some points on those different categories. So here it's a good way to see how they do those points. So I don't know why I got the French version. I probably clicked on the French version. But anyway, here it says quality of the proposal, recognized competencies. So you have all the details of how it's being evaluated. Okay. And then the next one, a request for standing offer. So again, it's an example with some furniture. I didn't mention that, but on the top right here, it's pretty obvious, but you already have the time to closing in days and hours. So here you can see in terms of trade agreements, this one, they've put the full list and you see it's specific to CETA, but it's specific to all calls, to all, and that's, well, that's a bummer. Yeah, I know. Okay, that's a bit a problem, yeah. So anyway, the request for standing offer. So in this one, the difference with the one that we just saw. So the difference between a request for supply arrangement. So request for supply arrangement, you still need to go through RFP. If your request for standing offer, it's kind of the same type of process, but you don't need to go to an RFP. They can buy directly from you. Okay, so one, it's kind of a pre-qualified list and you have a RFP, and the other one, you are on the list, but they don't need an RFP, they can buy directly from you. And so it's valid for sometimes, here it's valid for 12 months in that specific instance. So I'm going to share this one because it's, so that's the last type, invitation to qualify. It's almost kind of a RFI, but let's go and watch on this one. So this one, the invitation to qualify, so this one is a phase. Oh. Yeah, so so this one, for example, so it's an invitation to qualify, but so people who can answer that specific tender, they had to be previously qualified. I'm sorry, it's. Sorry, I'm going to jump this one because I did a mistake. Sorry. So anyway, an invitation to qualify, only qualified vendor can answer. It's not an ongoing qualification, and or you have the Ariba, supposed to have the Ariba leak, and that's really. What about we take 5 minutes break? I'd like to fix that. That SCP Ariba, I want to. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to.
I wanted to propose you so you can.
I want to see if it's because I'm sharing my screen that it's not working.